Chapter 9. Days passed. Wilkes and Billy explored the base. It was like a dozen such places that Wilkes had been on in his career. Standard hardware from the lowest bidder, as cheap as it could be and still work. The one thing he noticed that bothered him wasn't the gear, but the people. There didn't seem to be enough of them for a base this size. If anything, the military usually had too many troops for the work needed, a larger command being what the officers liked to wave at each other. Warm bodies meant more than cold rock. Given the extent of the base, almost as big as a very small town, there ought to be several hundred more people staffing it. Eventually, Wilkes and Billy worked their way into places not so easy to find or reach. "What's in there?" Wilkes asked the guards posted in front of a large double door. The two troopers, one male, one female, wore holstered sidearms, but they didn't seem particularly worried that they would need them. The man, who looked to be almost 2 meters tall, smiled down on Wilkes and Billy. Wilkes said, "The general has given us the run of the base. You want to open that door?" Now the woman grinned. "You don't want to go in there, Sarge. Show him, Atkins." The tall man touched a control on the wall. Billy gasped. "Fuck," Wilkes said. "Hell, she don't even have to do that," the woman said. "She's fertile all by herself." The projection floated in front of the wall. A queen alien occupied the center of a huge room, a monstrous sac jutting out from her rear like some obscene, translucent intestine. The sac, webbed with supports that ran on the convoluted ceiling and walls, was obviously full of eggs, and as they watched, the queen deposited yet another onto the floor, already thick with the things. A pair of attendant alien drones stood in a puddle of fluid near the sac's sphinctered opening, and they gently moved the fresh egg to one side as the queen began to lay another one. "Still want me to open the door?" "Why are you even guarding it?" Wilkes managed. "Pan right," the woman said. The taller guard stroked a slide control. The holoprod shifted as the camera panned. Webbed against a wall in front of a neat row of eggs were 10 humans. The cottony material holding them in place hid most of them, leaving only the faces bare. Some of the people were awake, eyes wide. Were they already infected, or still waiting for the horror yet to come? "Turn it off," Billy said. As Wilkes and Billy walked away from the stomach-turning scene, the tall Marine, obviously enjoying himself, said, "Have a nice day, folks." They weren't there to keep anybody from getting in. They were there to keep anybody from getting out. Spears watched the image of Wilkes and the woman as they turned away from the projection outside the egg chamber. They were weak, like most people were weak. But he could use them. That was the important thing. He looked at his chronometer. The mice are about ready. Time for the cat to wake up and move. He touched a control on his desk. "This is Spears. I want 1st Platoon A Company, saddled up and ready to ride ASAP. Full combat gear, full field rations. I'll be at the South Lock in 10 minutes. Better not keep me waiting, Marines." Wilkes went to the shower, water being one of the few things they had plenty of on the station. Piped up from some deep underground cave as ice chunks and melted on the way up by the heaters in the slurry conduits. SOP for this kind of operation. One of the few perks even grunts got. Alone, Billy wandered down narrow hallways, feeling as if she were being watched. God, this was all so insane. Having spent years in a mental hospital because the authorities thought her memories were hallucinations, Billy had some experience with madness. This was right up there. Spears ought to be in a silicon room somewhere, doped up to the hairline, scheduled for a full mental revision. Who were those people in there with the alien queen? What had they done to deserve such a fate? No crime to be so awful as to rate that kind of sentence. Spears was bugfuck crazy, and he should be put away. Instead, he commanded troops and had a personal nest full of the deadliest things that man had ever encountered. What kind of deity would allow that kind of lunacy? Only one that was crazy itself. She came to a door marked Communications. It slid open as she approached. A tech sat, a comm helmet covering half her head, staring at a series of flat-screen monitors. The tech looked over, saw Billy. "I heard we got visitors. Come on in. I've got a notice that says you're cleared for this area." Billy stared at the woman. Why the hell not? The door closed behind her. Wilkes sluiced the cleaner from his body, enjoying the feel of the hot water against his skin. They were in deep shit here, no doubt about it, but you had to take it as it came. He had expected to fertilize the flowers on the alien homeworld. Hell, he'd been living on borrowed time since the first time he'd run into these fuckers on Rim, all those years ago. He should have died with his squad then. It was a miracle he hadn't. And the years of trying to hide from it, and from the nightmares that wouldn't go away since, hadn't been all that pleasant. He had been ready to pack it in, to take the big jump, and to hell with it. But before that happened, he got pissed off. He'd blown the alien's homeworld flat, and that hadn't been enough. Somehow, for some reason, he was still alive. It didn't make any sense. He'd never been a religious man, but it was like he'd been given some kind of higher purpose driving him. He'd been too lucky, as if somebody had looked out for him. He was tired. He wanted to tube the whole mess, but he couldn't. It was as if he'd been given the responsibility to take care of this little problem, the extermination of all those monsters that had nearly wiped out humans. It wasn't fair. Nobody could expect one broken-down chem-head Marine to do that. But while he couldn't pin it neatly to any logical wall, Wilkes felt as if that was exactly what he was supposed to do. Save mankind. Damn. And he couldn't even float very well, much less walk on fucking water. The old man was white-bearded, his left arm bandaged crudely from wrist to elbow, his clothes dirty and torn. A dark and grimy baseball cap was pulled down over his head, and whatever hair he might have had left. He had an antique rifle lying next to him, something that appeared to be blued steel and worn wood, an old-style bolt-action piece, probably a hunting weapon from 100 years past, back when people hunted for sport, and not for survival. He sat cross-legged, leaning against a pile of rubble, mostly broken furniture, and shattered building material. A small campfire burned in front of him, the flickers from it painting the old man's face yellow-orange. A girl of about 6 leaned against the old man's side, her face dirty, long hair matted. "Here comes Air Sammy," the old man said. He pulled a vial from his jacket pocket, sprinkled a powder from it into the campfire. The fire sputtered, and the flames turned a bright blue-green. "I hope the bastards have their spook eyes on." Overhead in the night, the running lights of military attack jets appeared, red and green against the smog that was mostly smoke. The rumble of their engines increased. "Will they see us, Uncle?" the little girl asked. "I hope so, honey. They should." He waved at the blue fire. The fiery lance of a missile erupted from one jet, then other rockets followed. Like meteorites, the missiles streaked and died quickly, to be replaced by a brighter flash of light, followed by an artificial thunder, as the rockets exploded. "Stupid fucking airheads," the old man said. The little girl covered her ears with her hands as more explosions rocked them. A blast wave streamed the little fire, as might a man blowing gently on a candle. A woman moved into the circle of firelight. She looked a worn 50. Her clothes were smudged with ashes and dirt, and she had an air pump shotgun on a sling over her shoulder. She squatted next to the little girl. "Hey, Amy, you okay?" The little girl looked up. "I'm okay, Mom. Did you find anything to eat?" "Not this time, honey. Maybe Leroy did. He should be back soon. Damn! This last followed a louder boom and a brighter flash of light. Dust and small bits of debris swirled over the trio, and the fire flattened briefly under the blast. "Why do they bother?" the woman asked. "They hardly ever kill any of them, and the damn things just don't get scared." "Fucking airheads," the man said. He glanced around. "We'd better move out, Mona. The things will probably start their sweep after Sammy shears off." "What about Leroy?" the little girl asked. "Don't worry about him, baby. He will meet us at the reservoir. He knows we can't stay here." The old man looked across the fire and spoke as if there were an unseen watcher sitting there. "That's it for now, sports fans. Tune in tomorrow, same time, same satellite, for another exciting episode of Life in the Ruins of Earth. We'll sign on at 1900s, if the bugs haven't eaten us. Summer's over, and it'll be getting darker sooner." That's a dislink, and end it. He pointed at an old-style IR remote control at the unseen watcher, and the three people vanished. Billy gripped the arms of the plastic form chair tightly and found she had been holding her breath as the image on the view screen went blank. She forced herself to relax, to breathe. "They're regulars," the tech said. "Amy, Mona, Uncle Bert. Sometimes Leroy. He's Chinese, we think. The kid looks to be about 6. Our guess is that her mother is in her late 20s, some of the stuff she talks about. The old guy is maybe 70? Probably not related, though the kid calls him Uncle." "God," Billy said. "I don't know why they bother casting," the tech said. "It's not like anybody's going to drop down and help them." Billy shook her head. Maybe it's all they have left. It matters that they try. People do that. The tech shrugged, scanning for another image. "Or did it? This base location is classified information," she said. "But I can tell you that the cast we just saw is history. Even in cold sleep and with full race G drives going through, the hypercut we are on is a long way from Earth. The little girl could be years older by now. That, or worm food. It's a message in a bottle." Billy's insides clenched. She knew just how that little girl must feel. Something about being clean and in fresh fatigues made a man feel better. When you face death as often as Wilkes had, minor shit like crazy generals didn't seem so bad. While he couldn't say he felt the same detachment about the long nap some of the Zen martial arts boys had, Wilkes had looked death square in the face enough times to know it didn't scare him. You lived or you died. That was how it went, and when your number came due, you got collected. He'd thought his number was at the top of the pile several times, but death had only grazed him when it reached for another. Fuck it. A hot shower and clean clothes, however, were tangible, something you could relate to in the here and the now. The ground might open up and swallow you next step. A stray comet could zip in and squash you like a bug. One of the aliens could hop from behind a garbage can and eat your face off. But those were in the unseen future. Right now, Wilkes felt pretty damn good. 1 second at a time. Being cooped up on that drone ship hadn't given him any love for it, but Wilkes found himself walking towards the vessel because he had an idea. The thing had been unloaded, and it would need new fuel cells, and probably some repair, before it had any chance of being space-worthy again. It sat in the middle of one of the big prefab storage areas, a mostly dark and very cold room that apparently wasn't worth spending more than the minimum on for light and heat. Wilkes' footsteps echoed hollowly as he walked across the sheet crate flooring towards the American. The cargo bay door was still open, and the ship's internal lights were off. He walked up the expanded metal incline and slapped the light button. It was a little warmer inside the ship, the fuel cell's heat sinks radiating their excess warmth into the air. Wilkes moved deeper into the cargo hold, found an empty hex storage crate, and sat on it. It was very quiet, only the low hum of power units audible. After a few seconds, Wilkes heard what he expected: bootsteps outside the ship. Whoever was following him was approaching. Wilkes flexed his hands, rolled his shoulders, prepared himself to move, if he needed to move. The footsteps drew nearer. Billy worked her way towards the medical section. She wanted to see what they were doing to Mitch, if she could. On the other side of a clear door inside a smallish chamber that looked like an anteroom combined with an airlock, there was a short, fat man dressed in a lab cloak and what looked like white paint. She touched the plastic wall, and it was very cold. He spoke to her through an electronic pass-through. "This area is clean," he said. "You want to come inside? You have to be deloused first." Billy blinked. Deloused? "Chem and electro installation," he said. He waved at a horizontal cylinder about the size of a coffin on a metal frame against one wall. "All your internal and external flora and fauna get zapped. No stray bacteria allowed. Then you get spray-suited." He rubbed his leg with one all-white hand. "Osmotic. Lets your skin breathe air, keeps everything else in, including sweat." That would explain why it was so cold in the room. Maybe. "Seems like a lot of trouble." "Regulation sterile technique. Can't have some wild microanimals messing up experiment protocols. Even though the UV overheads usually catch any we miss, you never know. If you're just planning to satisfy idle curiosity, better you should look at it on the holoproj. That'll save you a lot of bee time." "Bee time," Billy said. "As in bidet. When all of your intestinal bacteria gets fried, it tends to do interesting things to your bowels. After your first delouse treatment, you tend to get a real fulminant diarrhea that lasts about a week. Cuts down on your personal mobility, it does." I'm looking for the artificial person who came in here with us. The droid. He's in mech lab. They're moulding him for an exo base and a walker. Won't take all that long. I can connect you on the comm." Billy thought about it for a moment. "No, that's okay. I'll talk to him later." "No problem. You need anything, just ask. I do what I'm ordered. No mistakes." As Billy wandered away, she thought about what the fat man meant by that last remark. It had been another long day. She was tired. All she wanted to do was lie down and sleep. No, not sleep. Not with the aliens here to infect her unconscious mind and make it churn out nightmares. She had thought the hospital awful. She'd feared for what they'd planned to do to her mind, the chemical lobotomy the medics had decreed. Given all that had gone on since she'd escaped, a mind wipe didn't sound so bad.